Belarus, landlocked, flat. Kinda sounds like a Tinder profile, doesn't it? Looking for someone who doesn't mind potatoes and subtle geopolitical tension, but seriously, folks, Belarus is a country in Eastern Europe. It's bordered by Russia, Ukraine, Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia. That's a lot of neighbors, and trust us, it's about as much fun as it sounds. Belarus is roughly the size of Kansas, which, if you haven't been keeping score, means it's not exactly a geographic giant, but hey, good things come in small packages, right? We'll let you be the judge of that. Way back when, like way back, Belarus was populated by various Slavic tribes. Think Vikings, but with better PR. These tribes were all about farming, fighting, and probably complaining about the weather. It's a timeless tradition, really. Eventually, these tribes decided to band together, probably for warmth if we had to guess, and they formed some early states. One of these was the Principality of Polotsk, which sounds like a discount theme park but was actually a pretty big deal at the time. Things were going okay, you know, relatively speaking for the Middle Ages, until those pesky neighbors showed up. Speaking of which, the medieval period was basically one long game of geopolitical hot potato, and Belarus was the potato. Nestled between powerful neighbors, Belarus found itself constantly passed around. First, the Mongols came knocking, which is never a good sign. Their arrival was swift and brutal, leaving a lasting impact on the region. They ruled for a while because, well, have you ever told a Mongol no? Their dominance was marked by strict control and heavy tributes. Then the Grand Duchy of Lithuania sauntered in like a charming but slightly intimidating guest at a party. They brought with them a different kind of rule. They were all, "Hey, want to be part of our Grand Duchy? It'll be fun." Their approach was more diplomatic, offering protection and a sense of belonging. And Belarus, probably exhausted from dodging Mongol horses, was like, sure, why not? The people were weary and in need of stability. This new relationship wasn't all bad. It brought a period of relative peace and cultural exchange. Belarus got some stability, some culture, and probably some really good Lithuanian potato recipes. The blending of traditions enriched the local culture, but it also meant getting tangled up in Lithuanian politics, which, let's just say, were complicated. Navigating these political waters required skill and diplomacy. The alliances and rivalries within the Grand Duchy often spilled over into Belarus, making it a pawn in larger geopolitical games. Defensive structures were built, and military strategies were constantly revised to keep up with the ever-changing political landscape. Despite the turmoil, trade routes flourished, and economic exchanges brought prosperity to some regions. Artisans and craftsmen thrived, creating cultural artifacts that reflected the diverse influences of the time. Educational institutions and scholars also benefited, as knowledge and ideas flowed freely across borders. Festivals and community gatherings became a way for people to celebrate their shared heritage and resilience. The spiritual life of Belarus was also enriched, with religious ceremonies and traditions playing a central role in daily life. Through it all, the natural beauty and rural life of Belarus remained a constant, providing a backdrop to the region's tumultuous history. Section 4, Grand Schemes and Shattered Dreams, a Commonwealth and some Wars. Things got even more complicated when Lithuania decided to team up with Poland, like a medieval version of a celebrity power couple. This alliance wasn't just a casual handshake, it was a full-blown merger of two significant powers of the time. Imagine the political maneuvering, the grand ceremonies, and the strategic marriages that must have taken place to seal this deal. It was a union that promised strength and stability, but also brought its own set of challenges. They formed the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which sounds like a timeshare presentation, but was actually a pretty big deal. This wasn't just a political alliance, it was a fusion of cultures, economies, and military forces. The Commonwealth became one of the largest and most populous countries in Europe, stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. It was a beacon of democracy in a feudal world, with a unique system of elective monarchy and a parliament that had real power. It was huge, it was powerful, and it was constantly getting into fights with its neighbors. The Commonwealth's military was formidable, but maintaining such a vast territory was no easy task. They had to defend their borders against a host of enemies, from the Teutonic Knights in the north to the Ottoman Empire in the south. Each conflict drained resources and tested the resilience of the Commonwealth. Belarus, stuck in the middle of all this, was basically the equivalent of that friend who always gets roped into being the designated driver. It was a strategic but vulnerable region, often caught in the crossfire of larger powers. The people of Belarus had to endure the constant upheaval of war, with their lands serving as battlegrounds for armies that cared little for the local population. Come on, Belarus, one more war. What could go wrong? The leaders of the Commonwealth often called upon Belarusian soldiers to fight in their numerous wars, promising glory and spoils. But for the average Belarusian, these wars brought nothing but hardship and loss. The constant state of conflict left the region economically and socially strained. Spoiler alert, a lot went wrong. The relentless wars took a heavy toll on Belarus. Cities were destroyed, farmlands were ravaged, and countless lives were lost. The once thriving region was left in ruins, struggling to recover from the devastation. Wars with Russia, Sweden, and the Ottoman Empire left Belarus battered, bruised, and probably wishing it had invested in a better suit of armor. Each of these powerful adversaries brought their own brand of destruction, leaving Belarus to pick up the pieces time and time again. The resilience of the Belarusian people was remarkable, but the scars of these conflicts would linger for generations. Section 5, We Will Rebuild Belarus under the Soviets. After the whole Commonwealth thing went south, Belarus was briefly independent. Emphasis on briefly. This period of independence was marked by a sense of hope and national pride, but it was short-lived. Because then Russia was like, remember that whole being part of our empire thing? Yeah, they weren't about to let Belarus slip away so easily. The Soviet Union quickly reasserted control, integrating Belarus into its vast empire. Yeah, we're bringing that back. The Soviet regime wasted no time in establishing its authority, using propaganda and military might to solidify its grip on Belarus. And so began the Soviet era, which, for Belarus, was a bit of a mixed bag. On one hand, the Soviets brought industrialization and modernization. Cities grew, factories were built, and the economy saw some development. On the one hand, there was a lot of rebuilding, industrialization, and free healthcare, which, hey, not bad. The Soviet government invested heavily in infrastructure, education, and healthcare, aiming to transform Belarus into a model socialist republic. On the other hand, there was a lot of repression, censorship, and that whole secret police thing, which, less good. The KGB kept a close watch on the population, and dissent was not tolerated. Many Belarusians found themselves in political prison camps for even the slightest hint of opposition. Then came World War II, which was bad for everyone, but especially bad for Belarus. The country found itself caught in the crossfire between two of the most powerful and ruthless armies in history. It was literally the battleground between the Nazis and the Soviets, which is about as fun as it sounds. The devastation was immense, with entire villages wiped out and cities reduced to rubble. Belarus lost a third of its population and most of its infrastructure. The human cost was staggering, with countless families torn apart and communities destroyed. The post-war period was a time of mourning and rebuilding, as the nation struggled to recover from the horrors of the conflict. Section 6, Independence Day. Belarus gets out from under the couch. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of being told what to do by one empire or another, Belarus got its act together and declared independence in 1991. It was like that moment when you finally move out of your parents' basement and into your own place. Exciting, liberating, and also slightly terrifying. The transition wasn't exactly smooth. There were economic struggles, political growing pains, and a whole lot of figuring things out. But hey, at least Belarus was calling the shots for once. Section 7. Belarus today, still figuring things out. So, where does Belarus stand today? Well, it's complicated and multifaceted. It's a country with a rich history, a complex present, and an uncertain future ahead. It's trying to find its place in the world stage, to balance its own national identity with the influence of its powerful neighbor, Russia. It's a country of contrasts and dualities, of old traditions and modern aspirations, of beautiful forests and industrial cities coexisting. It's a country that's been through a lot, but is still standing strong. And hey, maybe that's enough for now. As it continues to evolve,